Hi everyone, another day in paradise. Well, I mean it's not Morocco, but I guess it will do for now. This morning kind of reminds me why I quite enjoy life in Warsaw. Sunshine, green, there was a woman back there drinking a cup of coffee, like a proper mug of coffee, walking a dog. There's the sound of woodpeckers floating through the air. What a beautiful morning, such a lovely day. So I've been on a bit of a shopping spree recently, getting a few extra additions to my outfits for reasons I'll probably go into later on, but it's making me think a lot about clothes and clothing and that sort of thing. And yeah, I thought I'd make a video about it and tell you all about, or some of the things that are on my mind about clothes. So to kick off with, what would I say my clothing preferences are, the overarching things that I'm looking for when I'm shopping and I'm reaching for an item to try on and then perhaps buy later on. Well, I like colours to a certain extent. As you can see, I've got this very interesting rust coloured top. I like textures, I like comfort. It's probably the primary thing that I look for in a piece of clothing. But I also enjoy the playfulness of fashion and having different types of clothing options at my disposal. I like the way that changing the outfit that you wear can change the way that you are seen, perceived, and the way that it slightly affects the shape of your body as well. It's very interesting, and the more I experiment, the more I learn. Not everything's a success, of course, but I like to think that over 45 years of messing around with clothes and fashion, I'm starting to find my sense of style, and I've got a bit more of a refined taste of clothing and fashion. I think that even if I wasn't trans, I'd be so frustrated by the limiting mundanity of men's fashion. I'd probably still be striking out in weird and wonderful directions when it comes to my clothing choices. I can understand why some people appreciate the, let's say, simplicity of the typical male wardrobe, but I found that increasingly frustrating and limiting in terms of how I wanted to present myself to the world. And all this sort of takes me back to some of my earliest memories, because for as long as I can remember, I've always been aware of fashion. At the very least, I've always been very painfully perceptive that what you choose to wear says a lot about you, and also society and your peers and people around you will place a high degree of value in what choices you make, or what choices you have available to make, should I say. That's not to say I was the most fashionable or stylish child around. I've shown you some images of myself as a younger child before, and a lot of those outfits that I'm wearing are either handmade or certainly purchased in let's say independent stores. So I was very much aware of a kind of tension between what I was allowed to wear by those who controlled my fashion and style, by what I was expected to wear, let's say, by my peer group and friends, well, alleged friends in my school, and what I aspired to wear. And this was something that I recognized was quite a secret thing and not something that I could share widely, because I wasn't an idiot. I could see the difference between the types of clothes that boys were permitted to wear and the types of clothes that girls were permitted to wear. And my fashion preferences certainly increasingly were more towards the latter than the former. I looked on with a certain degree of envy at the types of outfits, the range of colours, the hues, the brightness, the variations of my female classmates, the girls in my class, and I found myself experimenting with that where I could. I had a sister and some of the clothes I think people had bought too big for her, so I was able to try those. And over time I was also able to experiment with my mother's clothing as well, even though that was probably a little bit mature for a 11-year-old child in terms of style choices. But I reveled in the comfort, I reveled in the sense of joy and completeness I felt when I looked at myself in the mirror wearing these outfits. I remember keeping a little stash in my bedroom of clothing, which I don't think anybody would have missed. They were bizarre outfits at best, but they were the ones that I had. I kept them tucked safely inside my duvet, knowing when to remove them when it was time to change the bedding. Just expanding on that sense of kind of isolation and secrecy, I knew that I couldn't, or at least I shouldn't, publicly demonstrate my desire to present in a female way, because, as I've said on my video before, that was something that I quite rightly assumed would trigger some negative outpourings from those around me and beyond, in fact. But I yearned to go out the door from time to time. I remember I used to essentially fake illnesses so that I could stay out of school, so that I could have an afternoon, have a day dressing up as and looking as myself. And I would think to myself, well, what's the harm of just stepping out and just going around the corner? Who's going to notice? At the time I was about 13, 14 years old, and I wasn't as well developed as I became later on, so I suppose I could have taken that risk, but it just felt like too much. It felt like too far. I didn't want to stir the pot even further. But then I left school, I went to college to do my A-levels and eventually university, and to support my studies, my income, I would get a part-time job. This finally gave me access to my own money, independent from my parents. And what did I spend my money on? Well, largely CDs, because I was very much a music geek into sort of alternative stuff like Radiohead and the like. The types of clothing that I got, well, I found it very difficult to find clothes for myself. I remember going to a shop called Madhouse where they sold very discounted jeans and stuff, and not even bothering to try them on and taking them home and finding that they were much too big. And then I exchanged them and got a pair that was much too small, so I just gave up on the entire venture because I was like, I'm never going to figure this out. I suppose I was so ashamed of my body I couldn't even bring myself to be in a changing room where there was the possibility that somebody might spot my semi-undressed self. It was too much to bear, the shame of it all. And so I would kind of accidentally land on things that would fit me, but nothing that actually felt like my clothes. When I got to university, I tried a little bit more. I remember buying some shirts in incredibly garish colors, especially blue and purple, but they still weren't right. They still weren't comfortable enough. They still didn't represent who I was. But I knew that the line where I could get those clothes, it was a line that I just wasn't comfortable in crossing at that time. But then eventually over time I found a little bit of courage. I've talked a little bit about my adventure in Kuala Lumpur where I got a makeover and I finally ventured out into public for the first time whilst presenting female, and the fact that that was exciting and anxiety inducing at first, but eventually felt comfortable and normal and just like me. And that was a really awakening point. And I try to replicate that from time to time. I would sometimes, if I was feeling especially brave, a couple of times I went out in the night time in Poland when I had some space to myself. I remember having these kind of knee-high, or not quite knee-high in my case, boots, but because my feet were too big for them, I had to tape them shut. And so, I don't know, the people of Wrocław were they were presented with this kind of stumbling image of me from many years ago. So yeah, I've progressed, I've evolved, and now here I am walking around as myself, like basically all day, every day. And to have that sense of freedom, it's remarkable. I'm going to show you the outfits that I've been putting together across this week so you can get a sense of how I'm presenting myself to the world, and I welcome all sorts of feedback and input. But I mean, I remember even a year ago, I never thought that, say in the summertime, I'd be able to be so openly out and about. In the winter, I would feel a lot more safe because I could kind of hide myself behind some armor of a big, thick coat, and that I felt would protect me as a form of armor. And now I'm completely unprotected psychologically. I've had a few videos asking about whether or not I pass, and I mean, I think that question is kind of moot in a way, because on the one hand, I have a mirror, I can see and I'm aware of how I look, but on the other hand, I don't know, I haven't actually been paying attention to people in the background, but I think by and large you'll see that people aren't really stopping in the street and paying me much attention. And even if they are, well, I'm walking around with a camera making a video, so that also represents something a little bit odd. So perhaps that's attracting a bit of attention. But when I go out on a daily basis, I think I get the odd stare. I did stop some older woman in her tracks last week, which was quite funny. But when it comes to anything beyond that, no, it's nothing, it's fine. It's just, I'm just another person walking around the city, going about my business and my day, which is incredibly validating. So, I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about why I had to go shopping recently, and it's because I realized I don't really have any summer kind of clothing. All of my outfits are for the winter or autumn or spring, so I've had to get a few tops, and that's been quite an interesting experience because, as I say, I would hide myself behind coats and layers and stuff, and so now I'm having to learn how different bits of my body are exposed. Like my arms and shoulders, for instance, I'm wearing this like shirt, but underneath is a sleeveless top. So how comfortable am I in showing different bits of my body? I talk with one of my friends about the fact that theoretically we can get away with lower cut dresses or tops. I'm developing a bit of a cleavage, which is something I didn't expect I would ever deal with, to be honest. It's not something that crossed my mind. And okay, yes, this top has quite a high neckline, but I do have a few sort of more lower cut tops, and I'm having to learn how many buttons is too many to leave undone. Let's say. I'm definitely going to wear a green dress, probably tomorrow, because it's going to be quite hot and it's a perfect summer dress. And it's like I have to try to figure out which button is the button which is socially acceptable. And that's something, yeah, that's something I'm learning slowly but surely. But a lot of the reason why I feel so well put together is down to the advice and guidance of Carolina. I talk about her a lot, and she's been really helpful at helping me refine and hone my sense of style, my confidence of being able to go in to a clothing store and just browse, do some window shopping, go to the changing rooms, try on some outfits, come out, look at myself in the social mirror. And she's given me that sort of confidence, which has certainly helped. I'm not sure how I would have coped otherwise. And I'd be quite happy to pass that confidence on. So if anybody would like some sort of support with their own shopping experience, reach out, let me know. I can't say that I'll be able to give you perfect advice, but I think sometimes just talking things through with another person can be really helpful. So yeah, let me know. Now I'm just going to close off on one final thought. Now, I've had quite a few people in the comments telling me that doing XYZ doesn't make me a woman. So in this case, I suppose wearing female clothing doesn't make me a woman. And I'm more than aware of that. There's a hell of a lot more to it than that. And in this hip video, I just happen to be talking about clothing. And for me, it's not about becoming anything. It's about being able to externally, visually represent the person who I am inside. It's a way of me showing and demonstrating to the world the me that exists. This is the person that I would like you to acknowledge and respond to, not some kind of false facade that I'd been putting on for the first 40 plus years of my life. This feels like me. It always has done. It always will, I would imagine. So I don't think wearing these sorts of outfits makes me a woman, but I think the fact that these are the outfits that I prefer to wear means that there's a certain type of femininity that I would like the world to acknowledge and respect. So yeah, what was that? Some fly bashed into my head. Was it a transphobic fly? Anyway, I'll leave it there. Have yourselves a wonderful week, and I'll see you again very soon. Take care. Goodbye.